do that? BNGR. The review scale. Why is it so important and what exactly determines a game's grade? Well, if you want to make a high-scoring game, you need to meet certain criteria. Your graphics gotta be nice, your music has to be catchy or at least memorable, you need to have enough content in your game to warrant the price, and most importantly, your game has to just be fun to play. The review system may vary for each person, sometimes a lot, but in the end, we all have the same purpose, to tell you, the consumer, if you want to spend your cash on this brand spanking new game. However, there is one crucial factor that games usually tend to forget. You see, the interesting thing about reviews is that looks, sound, and length can be overlooked without losing that many points. But the second you make your game unenjoyable to some people, scores will go all over the place. And when this happens, the game score is no longer about how well made it is or how much content's in it, but if the game fits the reviewer's preference. And out of all things that could go wrong with the game, this could turn into a game developer's worst nightmare. Isn't that right, Wario? I haven't forgot about Game & Wario. I'm watching it. Okay, so if you haven't heard already, it's pretty obvious Sonic Lost World fell in this trap. The reviews from critics were borderline random. I saw some 8s and 9s, but I also saw some 1s and 2s. The reception from Sonic fans weren't even consistent, which is saying a lot since they defend even the weakest entries. And when I played the demo at PAX, I still thought it was pretty fun. And yeah, it was an experience. So as a reviewer, this game was like freaking abstract art to me. Were all these fans and reviewers wrong, or was it really as bad as they say it is? Well, after playing the game for myself, I came to a pretty weird conclusion. I agree with neither. You see, people went in this game expecting another fast-paced Sonic game like Generations or Colors. And for good reason! Sonic had gone through an identity crisis for almost 10 years, having bad game after reboots that ended up being worse games, and finally, after having tons of duds, it seemed like Sonic was finally making a huge comeback. Honestly, all Sega had to do was make another game similar to Generations. It not only sold like hotcakes, but it was well received by critics and it defined what the future of Sonic could be. But it seems like Sonic Team had something else in mind. Instead of making the obvious game people wanted, we had a really obscure platformer that on the surface looked like it ripped off 2D and 3D Mario. So because of that, I don't really think people gave the game a chance. And you know what? You can also count me in on that boat. I also hated the game. At first, at least. My first few hours with the game were so infuriating that it consisted of constant yelling, internally crying, and spewing a tidal wave of butthurt on Twitter. It was an interesting day. But you see, after playing the game with a clear mind, I started to see the game in a completely different track. And when I mean track, I literally mean it was a roller coaster of, it's good, it's bad, it's a game, I think. So without further ado, here is Sonic Lost World for the Wii U. And not the 3DS one, because guess what? I'm broke. The life of a college student. So Lost World's plot feels more like your normal Saturday morning cartoon. Eggman tries to steal energy from a planet called Lost Hex, which reminds me of a certain board game, where 6 Zeddy creatures called the Deadly Six live in. As usual, Sonic tries to stop Eggman's plans, but little does he know, Eggman's controlling these Zeddies with the conch thing, and Sonic unknowingly destroys it, like he does with, well, everything. As a result, the Deadly Six attack Sonic and Eggman, so they both have to team up in order to stop them from destroying Earth. It's certainly an interesting twist for Sonic fans, but honestly, the story is so shallow that you'll just end up not caring about it. Sonic's being a jerk to everyone, including Tails.
You could have gotten yourself killed!
I was just trying to help.
The Deadly Six are mostly annoying one-dimensional stereotypes.
The last time we met, you ruined my nail art.
And all the supporting characters are pointless cameos. The only likable character is ironically Eggman, since he has some good writing and his actions are kind of unpredictable in this game. But in short, it's nothing to write home about, even though the cutscenes are pretty well made.
As long as I can still strangle a Zeddy, my hands are fine.
So with story out of the way, what's this game like exactly? Well, unlike most recent Sonic games which have 2 main types of levels, Lost World has 3. 3D gravity-defying stages, 2D classic-like stages, and unique ones thrown in the middle. But as many of you know, different gameplay modes in a Sonic game is like a kiss of death. Literally. Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Sonic Unleashed, Shadow the Hedgehog. They all have some sort of mode that ranges between mediocre and awful. So does Sonic Lost World finally break this chain of bad quality? No, it doesn't. So I'll start off with the main attraction, the 3D levels. Now these stages are by far the most interesting ones. You control Sonic on tube-like planetoids, where you can twist around and take any of the several paths given to you. It's a pretty cool twist on the 3D Sonic formula, pun intended. And it's such a cool feeling to flip right under a level and see a completely different setting that Sonic can roam in. Now I know people will be like, oh, it's just like Super Mario Galaxy, it's got the planets and yeah, it's got the planets. Well, guess what? Sonic actually did it first, since these levels seem to be inspired by the cancelled Sega Saturn game Sonic Extreme. And besides, once you play it, Lost World doesn't really feel like Galaxy at all. Anyway, to add to the craziness, Sonic's been given a parkour system, so nothing can really get in his way as long as you're holding the run button. You can even use it to run on walls, which is actually way cooler than it sounds. And yes, I know a lot of people have complained about this feature, but I think it actually adds a lot of skill to the gameplay. For instance, if you're doing speedruns, these trees will be obstacles, but in the main game, there'll be cool little stops to explore for items. In short, these were definitely my favorite levels in the game, and I had a blast with them, despite the headache-inducing spinniness. Second up are the 2D stages, which honestly do give off a 2D Mario vibe. Narrow passageways, tricky platforming, and collectible red rings similar to Mario's star coins are some of the main features. This is also where the game will start to slow its pace, since they're more platform heavy, but I really enjoyed the references to classics like Sonic on the Sega Master System. Am I the only one who played that system? But as a whole, these levels are forgettable. There's not really much to say about them besides that, since Sonic controls very similar to the 3D stages, but there's a handful of them I still ended up enjoying. You know, besides the whole been there, done that as an Italian plumber feel. But unfortunately, it all goes downhill from here. The worst stages of them all are all the other stages. They can range from on-rails levels to running around on spherical planets, to putting fruits and propellers to take off in a giant tube of juice? Wait a second. Oh. So that's where this review's going. Can someone explain to me why these levels exist? Because some of them not only feel like padding of the game, but they feel like they're in the wrong game altogether. I mean, it's obvious that devs have fun making these levels, but I want to try out the new mechanics and explore the open levels, not chase a freaking pineapple all over the map. Now the beginning ones can still be very enjoyable, but you'll want most of them to end fast and never have to revisit them again. Another design twist that baffles me is color powers returning. There is literally no reason for them to be in this game. They're not in the story, they're not mentioned by any of the characters, and they're on a freaking unknown planet that is obviously not their home. If anything, the main reason they're here is to be gamepad gimmicks, and I can safely say I dread every time I have to use one. The drill power, no skill involved, you just drag Sonic along the screen. The rhythm power, also no skill needed. You furiously tap your screen in one direction and hope Sonic follows you. Oh, and the Eagle power is a blatant ripoff of the Wing Cap from Super Mario 64. Now I could complain about these powers all day, but you get the idea. About half of them ruin the flow of the game. Though I'll admit, I still think the laser one's pretty helpful, and there's one place you can drill that's actually kinda cool. Speaking of flow, the way this game tries to teach you the ropes is just nonsensical. Unlike previous games where you got these question rings on screen, you have to tap them on your gamepad, which pauses the game when you do so. This means that several times in stages, your gameplay will come to a complete halt, rather than just showing it on screen. Can I just ask, why? These pauses happen for color powers as well, so I just kinda wish the game had some sort of tutorial stage. If this game is suited for kids, and me and many other reviewers in their 20s and 30s can't figure the game out without asking tons of questions, I'd say Sonic Team completely failed their demographic. And yes, the instruction manual does give a very brief description of Sonic's moves, but it's just dumb that the game doesn't do a good job explaining it in itself. You shouldn't have to memorize it off a manual. Anyway, let's talk about the Deadly Six's boss fights, since the characters seemed a little annoying in the cutscenes.
Don't talk with your mouth full.
You're right. Hey, I forgot the mustard.
Yeah, no. No! The way they work is that usually one of them talks as you get further in the second and fourth stage of a world, followed by a fight at the end of those stages. Now these fights are, well, way too easy. Once you figure out the weak spot of a boss, you can literally beat them in under 10 seconds. No skills required either, it almost always involves just spamming your homing attack or your kick attack, which just kills all the pre-battle tension that it tried to build up. Now this would be okay if they were memorable battles, but the fights themselves are completely irrelevant to the character you're fighting. Zomom is the big eater of the bunch, and he just body slams the stage and flips it around. Master Zeke is the old wise one, and he just throws balls at you? Xena, the beauty queen, just hides in snowmen. Okay. These boss battles were so forgettable that I actually had to look it up on Wikipedia just to remember their names. Well, there's lots of wasted potential here, so I just wish it didn't feel like an afterthought to a level. You know, I just really want to like this game. I'm a huge Sonic fan, and I even like a lot of the games in this series that have been critically panned. But there is one design choice I cannot ignore talking about. What I'm about to say is such a bad design choice that it makes half of the gameplay pointless. 100 rings don't get you an extra life. Now if you're a long-term Sonic fan like me, you know how simple this is. This means that besides your score, which is as pointless as it is in a Mario game, there's literally no reason to get more than, say, 20 rings at a time. I understand that they're doing this so the game would be more difficult, but there's a level that blatantly gives you extra lives. So why do I have to smack myself in a wall for 15 minutes straight just to get 100 lives, rather than getting the lives just the old-fashioned way? It sounds like a little thing, but this means levels literally shower you with hundreds of coins that do nothing. There's alternate pathways that give more rings, there's rings that equal 10 rings, there's freaking minecarts that you can bash to get more rings. This game almost has as many rings as New Super Mario Bros. 2 had coins, and there isn't even a ring counter on the overworld. But that's not all. There's a counter for the amount of animals you save in the game, which is used to unlock more levels, instead of rings. Are you serious? So why don't you just make rings a freaking currency, or decrease the amount of rings so it's harder to get extra lives? This is mind-bendingly bad game design. And this isn't the only major flaw in the game either. No, another big problem is the controls. Nothing are unplayable by any means, but they're a lot slower than people usually expect out of a Sonic game. In most levels, without spin dashing every 2 seconds, Sonic will lose his momentum really fast and go at more of a Mario-like pace than anything. Luckily, if you hold down the spin dash button, Sonic will go a lot faster, but good luck keeping that going after the first 2 worlds. And you know, people can say that staying fast isn't the ultimate goal of the game, or that I can't criticize the gameplay since it's so different than the normal Sonic, but I can't describe how infuriating it is when you're blazing really fast in early worlds of the game, only to fidget your way in later levels like you're trying to squeeze through a freaking subway station. It requires hours and hours of practice, and until you master it, it destroys any chance of fun you can have in the later half of the game. But why is that exactly? Well, you see, there's something I have to do. People over the years have grown scared of the Sonic fanbase, and I'm gonna be honest here, many of them don't listen to reason. Many of them will ridicule reviewers despite having valid points, and most importantly, many of them will find any way to justify their liking of the game even if it's complete crap. Trust me, I know. I had to deal with Sonic Genesis fans. So for all those said Sonic fans out there, this review is about to take a very grim turn. You see, everything I've said about the game so far has been after playing the first 5 worlds. I had not beaten the game yet when I finished the script, but I wouldn't think I'd have to change it that much after playing the last 2 worlds. I could not have been any more wrong. And you know what? I was still gonna be nice about it. Despite the crap I got in the Ice World and Beach World, I was still willing to give this game a check. But after the abominations that's Lost World's endgame, I got very angry. Probably the angriest I've ever been at a video game. So I don't even care what Sonic fans are gonna do to me. I'm gonna rip this game apart. Ow. So I'll start with Sky Road. Stage 1 wasn't bad since it was the 3D levels that we've come to enjoy in the game, but there were way too many unnecessary parts, like the repetitive amounts of speed segments and a really annoying Cloud mid-boss. Now that I think about it, I hate all Cloud parts in this game. Sonic moves super slow and it really brings the level design to a crawl. All they're really good for is just getting extra lives. But Stage 2 and onward is where the game really goes downhill. In this particular level, you're supposed to avoid attacks from Zavik, the leader of the Deadly Six. Now I have no problems if it was implemented in a cool way, but look at this design. There's no effort put in it whatsoever, it's just 2-dimensional platforms with the same looking dragon circling around you. I can barely even call it level design since it feels more like a platform test the devs made in its alpha stage. After the interesting, diverse designs given in the earlier stages, this is downright insulting to the player. And even after that crap, I still gave the game the benefit of the doubt. I thought maybe, you know, it was just a stage building up for Stage 3. Well, Sky Road Stage 3 is one of the worst levels I've ever played in a video game. Not because it's hard, but because, you know, I'll just show you. Okay, so I have no problems with Sky stages. I like him in Donkey Kong Country, I like him in Mario, heck I like him in Sonic 2. But this right here, this is a game design nightmare. To move Sonic around, you hold down the jump button to make him roll down the airstream. Now this sounds fine on paper, but the controls for this are near broken. Sonic's trajectory is near impossible to guess, and squeezing through small corridors is way harder than it should be. I mean, come on, it shouldn't be this hard to just avoid a simple object. But I think the worst thing of it all is that there's tons of games on iOS, Android, and heck even Flash games that do these levels 100 times better, and most of them are free. For crying out loud, at this point in the game, Sonic is with Eggman. Why can't he just make him a jetpack or have Eggman drive him around? They even have a bonus level where Tails flies Sonic around. Why can't we play this level instead of this air crap? The design choices in this game are just maddening. Now luckily stage 4 isn't horrible by any means, but it's mostly a vertical stage, like Crash Man stage for Mega Man 2. The only problem is you have these stupid springs everywhere, and if you go under where the screen scrolls up, you die. That's some serious BS design in my opinion. Does the bottom of the stage just magically disappear as Sonic ascends? It's not bad, but compared to the other 2D stages, it's just barely okay. The Lava Mountain, the final world, is all the monstrosity of Sky Road with a gigantic difficulty spike. I feel like stage 1 is there to trick you, honestly. It's literally just 3 easy boss fights on a single planet where the ground turns into lava. Whoa. But stage 2 is this ridiculously long on-rail stage that will make you break your gamepad. Unlike the one in World 3 that I enjoyed, there's no skill in it this time, only trial and error, with turns and jumps that are impossible to get the first 10 times. Mention this level to anyone who's played and they'll go berserk thinking about it. The only one that actually feels challenging and fair is stage 3, which should have been the entire world. It has all the gameplay that I enjoyed at the beginning of the game, and there's even parts of the level that test all the skills you've acquired so far. Even though the 2D sections are kinda repetitive here, it's still good. But honestly, the game should have ended here, because the final bosses, I'll just show you Sonic Colors' final boss. Cool, right? With all the wisp powers and homing attacks. Now look at Lost World's final boss. Looking familiar? Looking watered down? Looking like the devs are just like, oh no, man, we only got $5 left in the budget, we gotta make a final boss. Oh, Control-C, Control-V that crap in. Seriously, this is worse rehashing than the Bowser fights in New Super Mario Bros. But personally, I feel like the biggest crime is how the story is handled in the last world. The entire game seems to be building up to this climactic, awesome ending. But guess what happens? After you beat the Deadly Six again, they just vanish. You don't kill them either, they just run away and they're never mentioned again. When I saw the ending cutscenes without the Deadly Six, the main enemies of the game, it almost broke me. It seriously almost broke me. You spend all this time and effort to introduce new villains and you don't even try to implement them in the Sonic universe? Yet Orbot, Cubot, and Color powers are okay? For a Sonic game, this story's end is beyond disappointing. So now that I got the worst parts out of the way, how does Sonic Lost World fare as a whole? And are there enough good levels in the game to save it? Well, let's get straight to the review and find out. Now first up is fun. For me, Sonic Lost World is a game of mixed emotions. You start off the game fighting Sonic's new controls, which lack any kind of explanation besides tiny little question bubbles. You then learn the controls after some trial and error, and you really start to enjoy some of the levels. And then you get to the later levels that are so lazily designed that they'll make you want to rage quit. And to further dampen on your fun, you start to realize the game's design flaws and the amount of missed potential that it has. The color powers are overused and have almost no purpose in the game. The characters are almost all annoying and lack any kind of likability.
I'm just getting ready.
Well,
The boss battles in this game are cakewalks once you figure out their attack patterns and lack any sort of skill. I could be here for hours explaining all the things I hate about the game, since it literally feels like a mishmash of scrapped game ideas over the years. A lost world, if you will. I counted how many levels I enjoyed in this game, and out of the 32 main stages, I only enjoyed 14 of them. And with that kind of ratio, this game doesn't deserve anything more than a check minus. As for looks, sound, and length, I'm just gonna do them in one go. Everything else besides the gameplay is fantastic. The graphics are wonderfully made and have tons of personality. They even go at a fluid 60 frames per second, and I rarely saw the frame rate go any lower. The music is fully orchestrated and extremely catchy as well, and it stayed in my head for days after I stopped playing, especially Tropical Coast Stage 3 and Sky Road Stage 2. And as for length, there's tons to do here. There's items you can get from other players, extra bonus stages, 2-player online races, a co-op support mode, Supersonic if you get all the red rings, an extra world, and even online leaderboards through time trials. So if you do end up liking the game, there's tons of stuff to do after the 4-hour main game, so you do end up getting your money's worth. It just sucks that the majority of the game is an exercise in frustration. And for people saying the game gets more fun after replaying levels several times, it should be fun the first time. It's game design 101. You shouldn't have to get used to a game's design through repetition. The game should lay out its rules to you clear as day, especially for a platformer. So looks and sound get a check plus, while length gets a check from me. In short, Sonic Lost World is a good game, but it's buried in a ridiculous amount of bad design choices. When the game is good, it's really good. The 3D levels really feel unique and give a true sense of freedom to the player. Some of the 2D levels have a great sense of pace and have plenty of secrets to find. And heck, there's a handful of other levels I enjoyed. But it's so obvious that half the game was rushed and boned in, and there's absolutely no coherency. And yes, I know Sonic fans will probably kill me for this review, and I do respect if someone else likes the game since there are good parts in it, but even the most dedicated Sonic fan can't say that all the game is good, and they have to see that Sonic Team made a lot of missteps here. And I personally think that despite the good reviews, the Sonic fans, and the good marks that I gave, that this game still deserves a check minus. Whatever you do, don't buy this game at $50. If you're a hardcore Sonic fan, I'd recommend, if you have a Wii U already, to get this at a discount. Everyone else, just steer clear of this game. There's plenty of other platformers on Wii U and other systems that are way better than this game. And as for me, well, if you'll excuse me. Oh dear. Oh no! My gamepad! No!